welcome back to the Marine Report, the channel where you can find all the latest updates on everything related to the marine world. Joining us today are two of the leading experts in cetacean biology and research, Miss Wan and Miss Ang.
Thank you for having us on the show.
Very glad to be here.
Well, thank you for coming. For today's subject, we received some controversial news surrounding an aquarium and the treatment of their whales. The Guardian reports that Marine Land, a Canadian amusement park, zoo and aquarium, has applied to sell its 30 captive beluga whales to institutions in the United States. This comes after a previous plan to export them to Changlong Ocean Kingdom theme park in China was rejected by the Canadian government. Marine Land has made this request amid long-standing concerns over its capacity to ensure animal welfare due to financial and resource difficulties. This rejection came from the views that such a sale would perpetuate captivity for entertainment. As such, it has been cautious about the possible welfare implications. And what is most controversial is that Marine Land has threatened to euthanize the belugas if export permits aren't approved. Animal welfare groups and trainers have characterized this as a coercive bargaining tactic. Now, Marine Land has been a long-time controversial figure for its questionable management of its whales. Since 2019, at least 20 whales, including 19 belugas and 1 killer whale, have died at this facility. Critics argue that this reflects poor conditions and the inherent stresses of captivity. On the other hand, Marine Land claims that all these deaths have been from natural causes. Now, Ms. Wan, I'm told that belugas are one of your favorite whales to study. Could you tell us more about their natural habitats, behavior, and how captivity could affect them?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for your question. So, beluga whales live in the Arctic and subarctic seas of North America, Russia, and Greenland. And during migratory seasons, many populations can travel thousands of kilometers in just a few months. Satellite tagging of the Beaufort Sea population has recorded seasonal movements of between 2,500 to 6,000 kilometers just during the fall migration. They can also dive to great depths just to catch Arctic cod, and one individual has been recorded to dive up to 900 meters. And all this data just shows that beluga whales have huge activity ranges, and no enclosure can mimic this spatial scale. And typically, most aquariums are only 7 to 10 meters in depth, and this is far too small for belugas that can grow up to 5.5 meters in length. Furthermore, captive belugas are provisioned with food, limiting their natural behaviors to echolocate, forage, and problem solve. Beyond activity ranges, beluga are also highly social creatures. They can congregate and interact with groups from about 10 to several hundred. They are also able to form dynamic and close bonds with individuals from many different pods. In captivity, belugas are kept with a small fixed set of individuals, and this is a substantial disruption to the species' natural social structure. And also, in captivity, many belugas have been shown to exhibit abnormal signs of repetitive swimming behaviors, which are recognized as signs of chronic stress and behavioral frustration. Longevity patterns also point in the same direction. While belugas can typically live to 80 years, but in captivity, the average longevity is only 30 years. Taken together, these indicators suggest that captive settings can fall short of meeting belugas' biological and behavioral needs.
Right, thank you for that answer, Ms. Wan. So now we have explored how belugas are in their natural settings, and how captivity could negatively affect them. Zoos and aquariums began as sites of leisure and recreation, but have now shifted to one of education and conservation. For example, the Singapore Oceanarium hosts multiple education programs, such as the CITES Youth Program, and has ongoing research in various topics from population sustainability to human impacts on the local marine ecosystem. However, despite their potential contribution to wildlife conservation, zoos are often opposed by environmentalists because they rely on keeping animals in captivity. Furthermore, animal welfare is always a concern, especially when cases of improper handling and potential abuse still happen, such as the case with the Marine Land belugas. Now, what are your views of zoos and aquariums?
To answer simply, I'm neither in support nor against zoos and aquariums due to the nuances that you have mentioned. Animal captivity and the supply of animals are a concern, as we are not always certain if they are captive bred or wild caught. On the other hand, many members of the public do not have the ability or time to learn about wildlife and ecosystems. As such, zoos and aquariums act as an accessible location for all members of public, from young children to the differently abled and the elderly. Moreover, exhibitions synthesize information in a digestible way to make things easier to understand for everyone. For those who are concerned, however, there are alternatives through non-captive wildlife tourism. This is an emerging field that claims to fulfill similar functions as those developed by zoos, but without the captivity. Non-captive wildlife encounters take visitors into the wilderness through activities such as safaris, bird-watching tours, wildlife treks, and whale-watching trips to view wildlife in their natural habitats. These experiences are usually based on species that are predictable in where and when they can be viewed, and often involve animals that are popular or rare. However, one of the key concerns about such encounters is that human presence can have a detrimental effect on the behavior and well-being of the animals they come to see. Increased traffic can cause injury, stress, or disruptions to their foraging, nesting, or breeding behavior, and may even drive some animals away from their natural habitats or divert their natural migratory routes. Unethical wildlife tourism, such as baiting, can also change their feeding patterns, while some encourage tourists to touch the animals, which leads to another plethora of issues such as injury or transfer of disease.
Yeah, I think specifically for belugas, non-captive wildlife tourism can increase the anthropogenic noises, for example from ships, and this reduces the range over which a communication signal can be detected by other belugas. And in an attempt to avoid such noises, belugas have been observed to perform long-duration dives in avoidance to the ships. And as mentioned before, belugas communicate via echolocation, and this makes soundscapes an integral part of their ecology. They have a mass of fatty tissue on their forehead, and it's known as a melon. This is a common feature among cetaceans. The melon is used in the projection of clicks and whistles made by the animal, and this allows them to communicate, hunt, and navigate, especially in deep dark waters. And noise may also affect belugas in more detrimental ways. For example, in St. Lawrence Seaway, belugas are exposed to the noise from recreational and commercial vessel traffic, and there are concerns that such noise and disturbance may be one of the factors contributing to the unusually high mortalities of beluga newborn calves and adult females.
You raise very good points, and for this reason, it is important to incorporate education with such wildlife experiences. And increasing visitor awareness will increase compliance with pro-conservation practices that minimize human harm to the natural habitats.
Well, now that is something new. I've known of these forms of tourism before, but I never knew that there was a term for it. I guess zoos and aquariums, whether involving captivity or not, will always have some drawbacks, considering that human presence is inevitable for such institutions. As we mentioned, education should be the focus of such trips. And just for all you zoo and aquarium lovers out there, it is good to know that most of these places nowadays donate a portion of all ticket sales to the conservation of wildlife and their habitats. Some even accept sponsorships of any amount you choose, and these contribute to the rehabilitation of wildlife, vet care, and animal enrichment. So then, what about these 30 belugas that are now stranded between a new life of captivity for entertainment or a possible euthanization by the previous owners?
So for these marine land belugas, relocation should be a genuine welfare upgrade and not just a transfer to another display facility. And furthermore, the Changlong Ocean Kingdom has been criticized by groups such as the China Cetacean Alliance over welfare concerns. And releasing the belugas are unrealistic because captive whales face serious survival risk in the wild. Open ocean sanctuaries are an option. These are coastal enclosures in natural seawater designed to give whales more space than indoor tanks. However, there are practical limitations. So, for example, at the Sea Life Trust Beluga Whale Sanctuary, belugas have been observed to spend 92% of their time at the indoor facility due to cold weather. And while acclimating to the open water habitat, they have also caught bacterial stomach infections. And finally, an oil spill nearby has also impeded on the project's effectiveness. So the most practical option is still relocation, but to an accredited higher standard facility, which was what happened. So in January 2026, the US has given conditional approval for Marineland to relocate 30 of its belugas to accredited facilities.
Now, you mentioned high standard facility. What does this mean and what should we be on the lookout for?
Being a high standard facility is typically defined by higher standards of animal well-being and contributions to conservation. Some telltale signs of lacking animal welfare include repetitive behavior or bodily injuries. The easiest way to tell if a facility has a higher standard of care for its animals is to look at the facility's website and see if it's accredited by well-recognized and global certification bodies. This includes the Zoo and Aquarium Association of Australasia, as well as the European Association of Zoos and Aquaria. Certification requires multiple criteria to be met, such as the animal enrichment and diet, enclosure size, and access to proper veterinary care. Fun fact, Mandai Wildlife Reserve has been accredited with both of these certifications.
So it is important to recognize that although accreditation has improved welfare practices, but even the best aquariums will still struggle to meet the full and complex needs of captive cetaceans. Globally, there are more than 3,500 cetaceans that are held across 350 institutions. And going forward, I believe that policy should move beyond facility standards and address which species should no longer be kept or bred in captivity.
Alright, thank you for today's insightful conversation. We covered topics such as the evolving role of zoos and aquariums, the issues with wildlife captivity, alternatives to traditional zoo experiences, and also learned more about precious beluga friends. Once again, let's thank Miss Wan and Miss Ng for sharing their expert thoughts and opinions on these matters.
Yeah, thank you for having us.